When Elliot Dean stepped out of the armored SUV, the backyard fell silent. No more laughter. No one dared lift their phone to snap a picture of the woman they just drenched in soda. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply held up a document and said, "This is my wife, and anyone who humiliated her today will be facing the Department of Defense in a federal courtroom." And within 9 seconds, every person who had mocked Margot Dean was on their knees apologizing. While she stood there, in a soaked blouse, calm eyes are steady, her daughter's small hand was still in hers. Hi everyone, welcome to Alive Stories. Today's story is about a simple woman was mocked by snobby neighbors at a BBQ until a fleet of black SUVs arrived. Let's get started. It began on a golden June afternoon, with sunlight trickling through the old oak trees lining the private streets of Brookhill and Preserve, a gated community where perfection was manicured, marketed, and maintained like an asset portfolio. The lawns were trimmed with military precision. The white fences gleamed. Every home looked plucked straight from a high-end real estate brochure, arched windows, terracotta roofs, red brick steps polished by generations of quiet wealth. A world engineered to preserve the illusion of status. Just past the wrought iron arch, a crooked wooden sign fluttered in the breeze. Annual summer gathering, residents only. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Burgers sizzled on designer grills. Wine flowed freely into crystal glasses. Laughter mingled with casual name drops, IPOs, new Tesla shares, early admission to Harvard. And then a woman walked in. No one greeted her, or if they recognized her, they chose not to. Margot Dean, 44, wearing an off-white linen shirt, frayed Levi's at the knees, and worn-out khaki flats. Her hair was pulled into a lazy, low ponytail. In her hands, a glass dish covered with foil, homemade potato salad. Simple and sincere. No imported cheese, no trendy quinoa, just potatoes, mayonnaise, yellow mustard, and chopped celery. Beside her, a little girl, maybe 9, soft blue cotton dress, clutching her mother's hand like she sensed what was coming. Margot didn't speak. She nodded politely at a woman nearby, a housewife in a floral Ralph Lauren sundress, blonde hair blown out to suburban perfection. Fingers curled around a glass of Prosecco, the woman looked straight past her, eyes sharp with eyeless liner, as if scanning a misplaced lawn sign. And then came the first laugh. Not with her, at her. "Oh, looks like we've got another food delivery." Someone chuckled. A man in a crisp white polo, slick back hair and wide shoulders stood near the grill. He nodded toward Margot's dish. "At least serve it in ceramic. That glass tray feels like a middle school cafeteria." A woman with fire-red lipstick and sunglasses big enough to block judgment said half-jokingly, "Is she here alone or doing a trial run for the catering team?" Margot didn't flinch. She placed the salad dish on the buffet table like none of it had reached her. But as she turned, something hit the ground beside her foot. A toothpick skewer. Someone had thrown it. A laugh followed. A child pointed at her daughter. "Your mom looks like the janitor at our school." The little girl lowered her head. Margot gently tightened her grip around her hand. A staff member, probably hired by the event planning company, approached and asked quietly, "Excuse me, are you with catering or are you a guest?" Margot turned to the young woman. No anger, no edge, just said, calmly, "I'm Margot Dean. I went to college with Lena Rawlings." That name shifted something. Heads turned. Lena, the hostess, looked up from under a wide parasol. She stood slowly, coral silk dress fluttering, crystal earrings glinting under the sun. She raised her glass and stepped forward with the grace of someone who'd never had to look down. "Margot, is that really you?" Voice drawn out. Feigned surprise. "I thought you'd moved out of state." Margot smiled faintly. No explanations. No small talk about why she was there. Lena glanced at the salad. "You made this head tilted. How adorable. We usually have chefs from the Forge cater. But DIY spirit is always welcome." Then, turning to the crowd, louder, "Could someone move this dish to the back? We need space for the Wagyu sliders." No one objected. A few chuckled. Some began stealth recording what they hoped would be the day's first juicy drama. Margot stood still, A soft breeze passed, her daughter's hair lifted gently in the air. No one asked the girl's name. No one offered them a seat. No one said welcome. Nearby, a teenage boy kicked a ball too far. It rolled to Margot's feet. He bent down to retrieve it, looked up, froze for a moment, stared at her face. Something about it stopped him. Then, awkwardly, he stepped back like he'd seen something he shouldn't have. Margot placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Come on, honey," she whispered. "Let's find a spot where we won't be in anyone's way." And then a voice louder than the rest from behind, "Or maybe she should just leave." A pause. She doesn't really fit the vibe. No one at that backyard barbecue knew that once, years ago, Margot Dean had walked into the grand halls of Georgetown University with nothing but a canvas backpack, a full scholarship, and the quiet belief that hard work and decency were enough to get you anywhere in life. Did they remember her? Maybe. But only as a blur in the graduation photo. That serious girl with chestnut hair, who never showed up to parties and always had a notebook balanced beside her cafeteria tray. Back then, Lena Rawlings was the center of every room. Red dress, red lipstick, laughter that rang out before the punchline even landed. Chuck, now her long-term partner, was once everyone's crush, and Margot was the one fixing the grammar and group papers. The one who returned library books before they were due, the one who showed up first and left last. Nobody disliked her, but no one ever really saw her. After graduation, while the future aristocrats of her class funneled into banking, real estate, and flashy consulting jobs, Margot took a different road, cybersecurity analysis for a discrete branch of the Department of Defense. Her work didn't come with Instagram moments, no check-ins, no power suits, no seven-figure bonuses or summer getaways to the Maldives. Just a small apartment near the Arlington base, a home office wallpapered with Post-its, and nights spent chasing down threats that could crash the nation's defenses over a single misplaced semicolon in a string of code. Then came Elliot Dean, a man a head taller than her, salt and pepper hair, eyes that seemed to see through everything people pretended to be. He was the senior commander of the base, a man often described as distant, too by the book, humorless. But he remembered the names of every junior tech on his team. They met in the diagnostics room, where Margot was untangling an error pattern from a simulated cyber attack. He said nothing at first, just watched the screen, then nodded once. "You were the only one who caught that from the start. Good work." No compliment before or since had ever moved her the way that one did. 2 years later, they married. No bridesmaids, no champagne, no DJ, just an October afternoon. Amber leaves circling a quiet military base, and a promise exchanged beneath a pale sky. "I won't be the perfect husband, but I will stand by you, especially when the world turns away." And he kept that promise, until the illness took root. Thymic carcinoma, late stage. It wasn't his strength that failed first, it was Margot, once again, who noticed something was off. He was gone in 14 months. Most of that time was spent at home, where Margot became a full-time caregiver, learning how to flush IV lines, log treatment schedules, manage pain, and hold a man twice her size through the hardest nights of his life. After the military funeral, Margot moved to Brook Hill with their daughter, quietly. No one in Brook Hill knew that story. They didn't know she'd helped rewrite defense-grade anti-intrusion algorithms. I didn't know she'd been nominated for the Distinguished Public Service Medal, but she declined it, said it wasn't necessary. All they saw was a woman in loose jeans and linen shirts, driving an old pickup to school drop-offs, a mother who didn't join the PETA, didn't show up to wine yoga, didn't buy into the Brook Hill social feed. She didn't live on the golf course. She didn't own Lululemon and 4 Shades of Beige, so they assumed she didn't try. Margot never corrected them. She didn't need to be seen. She needed peace. For over a year, she'd turned down every invitation. But then a letter arrived, handwritten, from Rachel Morrison, the only friend she still kept in touch with. "Margot, come. Don't let them define you by what they see. You are more than that, and you know it." Rachel couldn't make it. Last-minute work trip to Seattle. But Margot came anyway. Not to impress, not to prove anything, just to see if any of them were still human. It started with the eyes, not stares, just glances, quick and precise, like paper cuts. They didn't bleed, but they sliced deep into every thread of dignity. Margot Dean stood by the buffet table like any legitimate guest. But the way people looked at her, she might as well have walked into someone's house without knocking. Her daughter held a small plate, 2 skewers of grilled meat, a few watermelon cubes, and a mint-colored cupcake. But as she reached for a glass of juice, a blonde woman gently slid it away and offered a tight smile. "Oh, sweetie, Eli, that's for the kids who registered. See the pink name tags over there?" Margot didn't respond. She simply picked up a cup of water from the far corner of the table and handed it to her daughter. The little girl took it with both hands, eyes lowered, not from shame, but because she'd seen this before. At the central round table, occupied by the wives of real estate brokers and tech founders, seated like a suburban Real Housewives judging panel, whispers had turned into a rhythm. "Is she really wearing jeans at a formal event? I thought only delivery folks dressed like that." "Single mom. Maybe look at her hair. Air dried. Water conservation queen. And that salad. Who even brings homemade food anymore, Amber?" Draped in a white Veronica Beer jumpsuit, leaned toward a newer circle of women. "Did anyone check the guest list? I'd bet good money she wasn't officially invited." The woman next to her chuckled. "If she was, it was probably a clerical error. Brookhill doesn't extend invites to boiled potatoes." The first tactic was fake kindness. Lena Rawlings, the hostess, glided over with a pink cocktail in hand, smiling like a lifestyle anchor on Sunday morning television. Margot still rocking the minimalist vibe. Huh, so refreshing. In a crowd full of trend chasers. She gestured toward her own sand-toned lace dress. "I almost wore a button-down today. But then I thought, who's even worth dressing up for? But you, of course, you don't worry about that kind of thing." Simplicity can be a statement, if you're strong enough to carry the loneliness that comes with it. Laughter erupted, not aimed at her, but through her, the kind that leaves bruises you can't explain. Margot found a small table near the kids' play area and sat with her daughter. Jordan Beck, real estate agent for high-end homes, strolled by with a craft beer in hand, voice raised just enough for everyone to catch it, visual hazard alert. A pair of jeans wandered into the no-fly zone of fashion. Who approved this violation? He winked at his buddies, then mimed taking a photo with his phone. "Anyone want a keepsake from Mom straight out of Walmart?" Margot said nothing. She was peeling the cupcake wrapper for her daughter. A child ran past, accidentally bumping into Margot and spilling a splash of orange juice on her shirt. "Oops," the mother called out, no apology, just amusement. She looked at Margot's damp blouse and raised an eyebrow. Well, no harm done. It was already wrinkled. Another mom chimed in, "Right, they say linen wrinkles are natural quality markers. Just maybe not that natural." By 3 in the afternoon, the air had shifted. Mockery wasn't casual anymore. It was coordinated. Lena waved Margot over to the main table and handed her a pile of greasy paper plates and cloudy plastic cups. "Would you mind helping me clear these? You seem really good at this kind of thing." Margot took the tray without a word as she walked toward the bins behind the tent. Someone whispered behind her back, "Told you." She didn't come to the party. She came to reclaim something she lost. When she returned, her daughter still nibbling quietly. A new group approached. This time, the men, led by Chuck Rawlings, Lena's husband. He looked her up and down, then raised his beer as if giving a toast. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's raise a glass to the heroic mother who survived this afternoon armed only with thrift store courage and a pair of department store jeans. Let this be remembered. The moment when a wrinkled blouse and an unverified potato salad became the face of cultural infiltration." Applause broke out, and laughter. Margot didn't move. Her daughter squeezed her hand. And for the first time, she whispered, "Mom, can we go home now?" Margot bent down, resting her cheek against the child's soft hair. "Not yet, sweetheart," she murmured. "I just need to see if they're still human." The far end of the backyard, where Margot sat with her daughter, had quietly become a no-go zone. No one came near, no one spoke. But the glances still came, like invisible lasers scanning every inch of her linen blouse, her flattened khaki flats, and the half-empty plate beside them. Margot didn't touch her food. She poured more water into her daughter's cup, tore a watermelon slice in two, and kept her eyes on the party's movements, like a soldier trained to survey the battlefield before ever drawing a weapon. A soft breeze stirred the lawn. A napkin someone had dropped floated past and snagged on her daughter's sandal. Margot bent down, picked it up, crumpled it, and slipped it into her pocket. Not out of shame, not out of obedience, just because she hated messes. Across the yard, Chuck Rawlings was deep into a story about his latest duck hunting trip. His voice rang out, confident and booming, marking territory without ever having to say so. Margot watched him in silence, not with anger, not with contempt, just clarity. She'd heard voices like his through soundproof glass in Washington, men seated in leather chairs, sketching battle strategies while laughing at the suffering of strangers. What they never understood was that arrogance is always the weakest point in any defense system. A small child, she didn't know his name, tiptoed over to her daughter. He lingered a moment, then whispered, "Is your mom, like, the cleaner or something?" Margot looked at the boy. She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "What do you think?" The child hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know, but my mom said she doesn't look like the people from here." Margot nodded gently. "Then your mom has good eyes. But remember this, whether someone looks like they belong has nothing to do with whether they're right or wrong." A young woman, someone new to the neighborhood, judging by her hesitancy, walked over. She wore a simple square-neck linen dress, not expensive, but elegant. She offered Margot a shy smile. I like the salad you brought. It reminded me of how my grandma used to make it. Nothing fancy, just real." Margot nodded once. "Thank you." No one else heard the exchange, but in a yard filled with polished performances, it felt like a slit of light cutting through a heavy stage curtain. Margot kept observing. Every joke is laced with venom. Every gesture meant to look casual but aimed just enough to sting. She watched the way hands flitted through hair, the way eyes flicked her way mid-laugh. She had spent years analyzing nonverbal threat behavior at the national level. Nothing about today surprised her. It was simply suburban theater. The same play, new costumes, polos instead of suits. She once told Elliot, "Decay never starts with action. It starts with the belief that some people deserve to be looked down on for no reason at all." Her daughter, worn down by the heat and noise, had dozed off with her head resting against Margot's shoulder. Margot draped a thin scarf across the girl's back, one hand still wrapped around the cup of water. She checked her watch, 3:56 p.m. She didn't know for sure, but she suspected Elliot was nearby, parked just a few streets away. Waiting, she didn't need confirmation, because Margot knew one thing with absolute clarity: when the time was right, he would show up. And every slight, every insult, every quiet cruelty would become part of the record. She didn't need a camera. The entire party was in the camera, out in front of her. The crowd carried on, playing their favorite suburban game, Make the Different Ones Disappear. But what they didn't know was this: when you look at someone and assume they have nothing left to lose, you've already lost track of the real scoreboard. The Bluetooth speaker buzzed out its playlist, manufactured beats like a fake applause track from a bad daytime show. Loud, even, soulless. Margot still sat at the edge of the lawn beside her daughter. The child's dress was wrinkled from sleep, her hair tousled across her forehead. Margot smoothed it gently, careful not to draw attention. Then, a voice, sharp and panicked, sliced through the afternoon unknown vehicle. "There's a breach at the gate." No one had time to react. A sound rose over the oak trees, deep, low, metallic. Not a roar, a procession. 6 black SUVs, no plates. Windows mirrored in chrome, turned into the estate grounds like a modern cavalry. They rolled in sync across Lena's prized lawn, leaving deep tire grooves in the grass she once bragged was triple-watered daily. From the center vehicle, a man stepped out. Silence. Even the sizzle from the grill seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew something irreversible had just entered the frame. He wore a formal military uniform, 3 stars on the lapel, silver buttons catching the sun. On his left shoulder, the seal of the United States Defense Cyber Division, a unit so classified. Half the guests had never even heard of it. He was tall, solid, but it wasn't his stature that made the crowd pull back. It was the eyes. Eyes that had seen too many wars to flinch at suburban cruelty. Lena Rawlings, still in mid-laugh over her champagne, froze. Her glass trembled slightly in her hand. Chuck, standing just behind her, barely whispered. Elliot. Margot didn't rise. She only looked up, and for the first time that day, she smiled. Her daughter still slept, peacefully now, as if some deep part of her had sensed it. She no longer needed to stay awake to protect her mother. Elliot Dean walked into the center of the lawn, where a few people still clutched their phones, ready to live stream the peak drama. I'm General Elliot Dean, Director of U.S. Cyber Defense Command, and the legal husband of Margot Dean. He paused, reached inside his uniform, produced a document, stamped in gold, marked with a federal security classification. Under federal statute, any act of public humiliation, psychological harm, or physical endangerment toward the immediate family of an active duty senior officer on critical assignment is subject to federal investigation. No one moved, no one breathed. Elliot turned toward Chuck. You, the man who poured beer on my wife and shoved her into a kiddie pool. That was you, correct? Chuck swallowed hard. I didn't know who she was. Ah, so you thought that gave you permission? Silence. No one laughed. A security aide handed Elliot a tablet. With a flick, the large screen near the patio came to life, playing overhead footage from a surveillance drone. The entire party was there. Margot was being mocked. Her daughter was rejected. Juice poured, shoving, shame. I watched it all unfold, Elliot said. I don't need my wife to explain herself, because you recorded every part of who you are. Then, to Lena Ms. Rawlings, host of today's event, a gathering filled with discrimination, ridicule, and the public degradation of an American citizen, a mother, and a cybersecurity engineer who once protected this country from over 100 coordinated attacks. Lena trembled. I didn't know. We just thought she was off-brand. Elliot finished the sentence for her. I heard. More agents stepped forward. In their hands, subpoenas, court orders, notices of audit and asset review. Each guest who had opened their mouth that day received one. Elliot's voice rang out, cold and iron-edged. This isn't a social game. This is the United States of America, where a woman doesn't need diamonds or a luxury SUV to be treated like a human being. A local journalist, present since the start to cover the community gathering, lifted a camera. Elliot nodded once. Film it. Let the truth be seen, not to shame anyone, but to remind everyone kindness isn't coded in your zip code or stitched into your designer tags. Then he turned to Margot. Do you want them to apologize? She looked around at the faces that had flung insults at her all day, now pale, lowered, drained of sparkle. She shook her head. No, I want them to learn something and teach their children better. Elliot bent down and lifted their daughter into his arms. The girl stirred, saw her father, and blinked slowly. No surprise in her eyes, only quiet knowing, as if she'd always trusted that if anyone could protect her mother, it would be him. He handed Margot his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Let's go home. And together, mother, father, daughter, they walked out of the party. No music, no speeches, no final toast. Only a silence so heavy, it crushed the illusions of an entire neighborhood built on performance. Not with explosions, but with truth. By morning, Brook Hill wasn't just trending on local news. It had exploded across national headlines. What began as a polished backyard BBQ had turned into a cultural reckoning. Silent woman, supreme power. The day Brook Hill burned without a flame. Neighbors passed each other on the sidewalks without saying a word. The local hair salon, once a hub for cheerful gossip, closed early, indefinitely. The pristine sign at the entrance, Brook Hill, where excellence lives, it was quietly taken down. Party photos vanished from social media. Some were deleted by choice. Others, not fast enough. Lena Rawlings, once the unofficial queen of Brook Hill, released a public apology video, shot under the yellow hue of her living room lamp. No lipstick, no jewelry, No filters. I was wrong, she said. I forgot that dignity isn't measured in designer labels. I taught my child the wrong things, and I accept full responsibility. The comments flooded in. Now you realize it. Would there be an apology if no one had filmed Chuck Rawlings, who once led the joke at the kiddie pool, sold the house, or was forced to? No one's sure. His real estate firm was audited. Federal investigators found layers of forged documents and shady filings. One email from the Office of Defense Legal and Financial Affairs. It was enough to make every investor pull out overnight. And Margot Dean. No interviews, no talk shows, no press releases. She only spoke once to a young girl at the Saturday farmers market who asked shyly, "Are you the lady everyone's talking about?" Margot smiled. "I'm Chloe's mom, that's all that matters." But people kept asking, why did Elliot Dean, one of the most powerful military figures in America, let his wife endure public humiliation? Why would a man who commands fleets stay silent for a whole year? The answer came not in a press conference, but in a single hand-typed email sent to one journalist, with clearance to publish just one quote: "I didn't die, I disappeared." 1 year ago, I was assigned to lead Project Eclipse, a global cyber defense and preemptive strike initiative. To take command, I had to vanish. All records failed, legal identity terminated under a classified alias. Margot knew. She agreed, and she told no one, not even our daughter. I insisted she accept protection detail. She refused. She said, "If I can't survive as a widow, I don't deserve to be your wife." And she lived exactly that way, with grace, with judgment, being overlooked, underestimated, treated as invisible, so that I could complete my mission without worry. I've prevented 14 international cyber attacks, but the thing I'm most proud of is the woman who fought without a uniform by quietly surviving the contempt. Soon after, Elliot and Margot left Brook Hill. They didn't just move. They bought the entire north tract of land, once an unused field bordering the lower-income neighborhood nearby. There, they built a new community center. It had a library, a cafeteria, and free coding classes for underserved youth. It was named the Chloe Center for Quiet Strength. No donor plaques, no ribbon-cutting ceremony. Just one line etched into stone by the entrance for those forced into silence. But who stayed anyway? Have you ever walked into a room and within 5 seconds, you knew? You weren't welcome, no one says it, but the silence speaks, a glance, a smirk, a seemingly casual, "Do you work here?" So you smile anyway, even though you know no one will smile back. You showed up with kindness, brought the best of what you had, and they looked at it like it didn't belong, because it didn't match their brand, their palette, their curated little vibe. Margot Dean never raised her voice. She didn't demand respect. She didn't post a manifesto. She stayed. She let the silence do its work. She let the arrogant crash into the mirror. They'd built for judging everyone else. This story isn't about a general, and it's not just about a wife. It's about anyone who's ever been sized up, left out, or pushed to the edge of a room because they didn't look the part. If you've ever been told you don't quite fit in here, if they laughed at your clothes, your old car, the dish you brought to the table that didn't have the right ingredients, if you've ever stayed silent, not because you were weak, but because you knew your dignity was louder than any scream, this story is for you. Have you ever been the Margot at someone else's party? Have you ever stayed silent, not out of fear, but because you knew you didn't need to shout to be right? Share your story in the comments. Tap, like if you believe respect isn't about price tags. It's about presence. And hit subscribe if you want more stories about the underestimated who made the world stop and look again. Because sometimes silence isn't retreat. It's the strongest way to exist in a world addicted to noise. And maybe, just maybe, some of us are still living under the labels others have given us. But not forever. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.